What we do here is go back.
All right, NYB, we are back. Champion on the Money Your Business podcast. Once again, episode 138. We're just trucking along here. Thank you so much for everybody that has supported the podcast, whether you've been listening, whether you've been sharing, you've been doing both, whether you're telling friends, whether you're telling people that you know don't like you, but you're sharing it with them anyway. So everybody needs to hear the great content here from the podcast. Subscribe, listen, wherever you get your pods, as well as the mybpodcast.com. And of course, we're brought to you always by the Binge Podcast Network at onabinge.com. Listen, another great day. I know everybody is still reeling from everything that's going on. You've got governors coming out, issuing stay-at-home policies and things like that. And many of you for the last week or so have been working from home and trying to get accustomed to that. Shout out to everybody that is not able to work from home. So those folks, let's not forget about those folks that are working service-related industry, those that are restaurateurs. Let's not forget our college students. You know, everybody doesn't have a parent to go home to or that sort of thing, or a family member. So let's not forget about those folks. And, let's just have compassion for people, because everybody's situation is different during these tough times. The one thing that we do know is we'll get through it, folks, and we'll be bigger and better than ever once we do. Listen, I'm going to introduce today's guest. She's coming to me from Los Angeles, California. Jodie Hopperton is here from FORE.media. We're going to get into all her background, so don't you worry. In the show notes, you will see ways that you can connect with Jodie once you get a chance to hear this amazing content. So I'm not putting her on the spot, but she's joining here on a Monday afternoon here. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. She's in Los Angeles. But Jodie, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me here on the Money Your Business podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, especially in these crazy times.
Crazy times they are. Well, Jodie, let's get right into it. So for people who don't know, if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know who Jodie is, we're going to get into that. So Jodie, share with us your background and how you got into business, and then ultimately how you got here to the States. And so I don't want to give too much of it away. I want you to kind of unpack it for us on how you got over here into the States and how you got to Los Angeles, California, Hollywood.
What a great place it is to be. Well, as you can probably hear, I'm not from LA. I'm actually from the UK. I'm from London.
Yes.
And let me go back a bit, because I think this will just give a bit more context. So my background's actually in news media. I worked for the Daily Mirror in the UK. And I got to my late 20s and I thought, I've always wanted to live in another country and learn another language. So I went to France, because Paris is 2.5 hours on a train from London. And I thought, if I don't like it, I can go back home. Yeah, and that was the start of just an incredible journey in the last kind of 15 years or so. It's taken me around the world. So long story short, I spent 8 years outside the UK, mostly in Paris. I stayed in the news business. I worked for a couple of the trade associations, the Global Editors Network, the World Association of Newspapers, and I spent 5 years at the New York Times out of their office in Paris. I also spent a year of that in Madrid for a year. And I spent quite a lot of time, obviously, in New York as well, working for the New York Times.
Okay.
Then I moved back to London, because as much as I loved Paris, I felt like it was time for another move. And just as I moved back, I was just getting settled and an opportunity came up to move to LA. And my first reaction was, well, can't we move this business to New York or San Francisco? Because they're two cities I know, I could plug in kind of professionally and personally. And this was 5 years ago, by the way. And I just thought, wow, this is strange. I don't really know much about Los Angeles. So let me do a little bit of research. Let me find out a bit. And I spoke to my best friend in the world who came out here to do a lot of business, also from the UK. And she said, Jodie, do it. It's amazing. I was like, wow, I've never heard her so confident before this.
Right.
And as I was researching, you know, particularly in media, of course, because we've got Hollywood here, there's just so much innovation around news and media and entertainment. So I really got to understand that LA, although it wasn't on my radar, and I still feel like it really isn't on many people's radars in that way, there's so much happening here. So I took the opportunity 5 years ago and I haven't looked back.
Wow. Okay. So let's unpack that even some more. So you end up, you transition from your media roles and you end up in Los Angeles, California. Did you have any relationships with anybody in Los Angeles at the time when you got
there? So what I was doing when I moved is I'd actually be consulting to a lot of media and tech startups, those that are working with the news media business, and helping them either set up their operations. And I was doing quite a lot of work in virtual reality. So when I came here, I actually started doing some work with a lady that's known as the godmother of VR, Noni de la Peña.
the godmother of what's that?
The godmother of VR, of virtual reality.
The godmother of VR, virtual reality. Wow.
That's quite a title, huh?
That's a title.
So I learned all about this new medium called virtual reality, and you know how you can put on these headsets and literally be transported somewhere else. And it kind of blew my mind. And as I was looking at some of this new technology, I thought, God, my colleagues back in Europe would love a lot of the things that are happening here, a lot of the innovation. Like I could just see it. So I spoke with a couple of the trade associations that I've been working with and said, guys, I think a lot of your membership would be really interested in some of the things that are going on here. So I talked to them a little bit about Los Angeles, about virtual reality, augmented reality. And the Global Editors Network said, you know what, let me send some of our executives from our member organizations. And so I ran a tour for them. They spent a week with me and I took them around a lot of the virtual reality studios here that were setting up and how they were producing content. And then they went back to their different countries, and these guys came from all over the world. Yeah. And they started creating all this amazing virtual reality. So they created this really tight community between themselves, but also between the people that they'd met here. So, I mean, things like the Austrian Philharmonic Orchestra had its first virtual experience. And Vienna is this beautiful city. They've got just incredible opera house there. And now anyone around the world could experience that. And I thought, wow, this is just so powerful. And so from all that, I realized that actually there's a need for a lot of business executives to connect with innovation and connect with the things that are happening. And of course, there's a bunch of different ways people can do that, but you can't beat face-to-face. You really can't beat face-to-face.
Exactly. Okay, and so as you're working with these executives and you're introducing them to Los Angeles, the business community, the landscape, their ability, and compelling them, I guess, for their ability to be successful with their current business and then anything that they launch. And so as you're taking them around, what was some of the feedback you got, particularly early on as you're doing that? You know, you come off as someone that would be a great liaison for something like that, to say the least. So what was some of the feedback you got from the executives as you first started doing that? And how does that compare to the feedback you get today?
Do you know what? There's two different types of feedback I get. And this is what I find fascinating. And this is why I wrote a book about Los Angeles, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But the first thing that I always get from business executives is, we want to go to Silicon Valley. And I say, sure. Let's talk about that. And so we go through a needs analysis. And effectively, some of your listeners may already know this, and it happens as well in the US, but I think a lot in Europe. If you're a business leader, you want to see what's coming. You want to see what's next. What are the things that are going to disrupt our industry, disrupt our business? You know, we hear that a lot. And obviously, so those are really smart people. But what happens is they can go to conferences, they can read papers, but they don't really get that real connection. Right. So what they want to do is work with people and meet people that can actually make the difference, not only learn about what are the things that are coming up, but how do I connect with the people that are really the pioneers in these new technologies. So those are the people I get who want those face-to-face. So I get this question. We want to go to Silicon Valley. So I say,
okay.
we go through this. I go through this little needs assessment with them and look at what are the issues facing their business, what's going on. And I say, do you know what? Great. Here's a few companies that I think might be interesting for you. And it depends who they are. As I say, I work with a lot of media companies. So a lot of it might be around data. It might be around personalization. We see a lot right now on the streaming wars, as they're known, on sort of this live content, the Netflix and things. And so we talk about some of those things. And I say, look, here's a few companies that I think might be of interest. And they say, yes, that's it. Great, we've got it. And I say, fantastic. Only slight thing, those companies aren't in Silicon Valley, they're in Los Angeles. And I always get this pause. It's kind of like, oh. And I just find it fascinating that Silicon Valley has got this real mantle for being innovative and the most innovative city. And to be fair, you know, they're the home of venture capital. But now that's changed. This has been a long time coming, right?
Sure.
So I think people are moving away a little bit from Silicon Valley. It's owned by a lot of big companies now. And there's so many different hubs. You know, you're in Memphis, I'm in LA, these different hubs that do different things. And Los Angeles is just really well known now for consumer innovation. And so a lot of the feedback I'm getting now is, okay, if I've got a consumer product, I need to learn how to connect with my audience, for example.
Right.
And you know a lot about this because obviously you do podcasts.
Right up my alley. Exactly.
Exactly. So one of the things that LA is great at is communication. Because Hollywood and the roots of Hollywood is all about storytelling, right? So if you're a brand, a lot of brands now come to LA to talk to people here about how do we craft our stories? How do we tell our stories across different platforms?
Exactly.
So you just see LA as a completely different area. And I guess there's a couple of other things that make LA quite unique like that. So manufacturing's huge here.
Oh, is it? Okay, now that I didn't know. I didn't think it when I think of Los Angeles. I don't think manufacturing at all.
Go on, so tell me, what do you think of when you think of LA? I love asking people this question.
Oh yeah. So of course, you know, number one, you think Hollywood. You think warm weather. You think rarely rains. You think obviously was the number 2 city in the country after New York in terms of population. You think of, you know, beaches and palm trees, and you know, everybody's writing a screenplay, and you know, I think of business. You know, I've been out there for business expos and conferences and things like that. But yeah, it tends to be what I think about. Everybody's writing a screenplay, and everybody's ready to go to the beach, and the office closes at 3:00 every day. And
see, you know, I get this from New Yorkers all the time. They're like, "Oh, LA, you know, you guys are so laid back. Stuff just doesn't happen there. We're like fast. We do things properly."
Right.
But, you know, I'm going to argue with that because the thing that really surprised me is a lot of those things are true in terms of like, there are the palm trees. We've got the sunshine. Of course, there's Hollywood, and so many different industries stem out of that.
Right.
But it is more laid back. And it fascinates me because having lived in London and Paris and New York and Madrid, like these are much faster cities. Yeah, LA is just as productive. It's just a different way of being. It really is. So LA's just got a slightly different pace. And yeah, when you have a meeting, I mean, I've had meetings and people have said, you know what, we just need to go and brainstorm this. Should we go on a hike? And that kind of completely took me back and thought, well, actually, that's amazing. Let's go on a hike and talk about this, because having an hour with no phones, no other distractions, and just walking and talking,
right,
is a very different way of being. And it's actually really productive to do that. And it really gets out that creativity. So I feel like Angelinos are very good at finding ways to bring out that creativity, which isn't necessarily fast paced. And if we're going to look at silver linings of what's going on now, because this is what I'm hoping we'll have some silver linings out of it, the thing I'm getting from a lot of people is that they're actually slowing down for the first time. We're so used to being on the move and going in places, and now we're being forced to sit in one place.
Yeah. I mean, you know, what's interesting with that, Jodie, is people, you know, again, I think last week was very eye-opening, because last week I know for a lot of people was kind of that first full week for those that are able to work from home. I know that everybody's not able to do that. But for many people, and I think many executives who were slow to adopt that remote work type style and culture, I think their eyes were blown open and doors blown off, quite frankly, that they were able to still be productive, and the things that they were worried about, that they cared about every day, sitting in traffic and, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to be here, I got to do that, and when people are at home and they just got to have their family around and that sort of thing, and could kind of break away and do video calls and reach people on the phone. I'll tell you, last week, again, being someone in the banking industry, I got just as many people, if not more, on the phone that I know I'd never get on the phone, that were at home with the dog, probably sitting by the fireplace in their PJs, that answered the phone, and we had great conversations to talk about everything from the pandemic to what was on TV and everything in between. So yeah, I agree right there with you, Jodie, that these times, I think, are going to make for an evolved culture over time, even as things pass by and we move back to some level of normalcy.
Totally. And it's quite interesting. I think I saw something the other day where someone said we shouldn't call this social distancing. We should call this physical distancing,
Right.
but with closer social contact. And
Yeah.
I think that's right. I mean, I'm connecting with people far more often.
Yeah, it's not social distancing. It's actually, it's more, even if you have a distancing physically, it's not social disregard. And that's the thing that I think people were concerned about, is it doesn't mean it's social disregard. We shouldn't be disregarding each other socially. We just have to, maybe part some ways physically to keep a real virus from being spread and mutating and doing all that type of thing. And then I think once it's kind of gone, I think what it'll do is, maybe to your point, is draw us together even more than we were before, because the things that we cared about, again, that created barriers between a lot of us, get removed, and we get back to basics. I know on the last episode, my guest spoke about getting back to the basics, and I think that's what this will start to do over time.
It's so true. And I mean, I live in LA, and obviously most of my clients are in Europe.
Okay.
So I'm used to doing, I love both sides of it, but I'm used to doing a lot on Zoom and other video conferences, as well as seeing people face to face. So I have three different phases. So I have my clients who are paying me, and those are the guys in Europe, the business leaders. And the first phase of working with them is really over video conferencing and establishing needs, and things like Google Docs and all those shared docs and things just make it really easy for us to collaborate, which is great. So I can get a really good understanding of what they're working on and what they need and what are the challenges that they're really facing right now.
Yeah.
The second cohort is obviously in Los Angeles. I have a great network here, and I want to be out, which is the thing I'm struggling with slightly. I'm having these conversations, but I miss seeing people in person.
Right.
Hearing about what are people doing, what are the true innovations that are happening now? What are the things that people are working on? What are the new businesses that are being started? Who's just got funded? So I can really keep the pulse of the LA innovation ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then the third phase is my favorite bit, which is when I've got my clients in town in LA, and I get to show them this fantastic place, and I get to connect them with business leaders and the tech pioneers here that can actually help with their businesses. And you see some of these conversations happen. And then afterwards, I get these follow-ups with people saying, oh, well, great, we got an investment from that financial client that came over, or this insurance company have decided to do this, or we've just partnered with these guys. And you kind of get that follow-up. But it's interesting that those three phases, that first phase, I'm still very much speaking with my clients. It's been a great opportunity to reach out. As you say, you can get people now. And although we don't know what the other side's going to look like, people definitely want to connect. They definitely still want to hear about what's new, what's happening. I'm just missing the in-person bit right now, and I'm missing my clients being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way. I typically work with a lot of banks in the Midwest, so I echo what you're saying. Typically, I engage, Jodie, the same way you do, which is, usually by a conference call or a video call. There's some folks in my organization who are just now getting used to the video call, but I've always been a big GoToMeeting, WebEx, Zoom person, because it allows me to interact. There's an expense to me connecting because I'm typically traveling the Midwest. So I'm going to Minnesota or Illinois or Michigan, Wisconsin or Nebraska, somewhere in the bread bucket of the country. And so, by traveling there, I want to make sure that on both of our sides that we recognize there's a value, there's a need. And, at that point, we continue to develop the relationship. And like you mentioned, face-to-face is still key. It's always going to be key because we're social beings as human beings. But, again, that vetting out and that establishing of trust and confidence and likability, which is key to doing business, comes from being able to do the video calls and ask the open-ended questions and have a dialogue. And then we say, okay, it makes sense for us to get together. All right. So now it makes sense for me to spend my money to book an air flight or, air ticket and hotel and rental car and all that type of thing. And then go and have a face-to-face and then ultimately, close business where I'm adding a value and solving a pain point of a problem. And so again, utilizing this technology, I think again, this is gonna help spur along some of the naysayers who think that how they did business yesterday is how they'll continue to do it tomorrow.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I've always been a proponent of spending some time at home. As I say, I love face-to-face. I'm really similar to you.
Yeah.
But when I was at the New York Times, I remote managed my team for a year whilst I was in Madrid.
Yeah.
Then I came back. I really loved being around people. I loved having face-to-face with my team, although I was speaking to them, I just love being in the office. But after 2 weeks, I thought, God, this is really time consuming, because as much as I love managing people, and I really do,
yeah,
having people there all the time, I just felt there were just all of a sudden all these knocks on the door. Jodie, what about this? Jodie, can you help with that? Jodie. And so I said, you know what, guys, I'm going to do 1 day a week from home.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make it a Wednesday, very specifically a Wednesday, because I don't want people to think I'm having a long weekend. This is very much work.
Right.
But that Wednesday was so good for me to be able to do the things that I needed to, my head down day. The team knew I could contact them, but over a period of time, we got into this really great way of working where they'd happily send me a message or call me if they really needed something. But actually, most of the time, they didn't need me. It was just that it was the convenience of having me there meant I could answer more questions. So actually, it was better for them not to have me around for a day anyway. I could get my head down and really get things done, and it was really good. And we started doing that as a team.
Yeah.
And we'd have people sometimes do 4-day weeks in the office, and we'd all make sure there were a few days where we'd all be in the office so we could all collaborate and speak. But we found it was actually way more productive and way more efficient. And I think now, having seen more and more people on these video calls, I think we're going to have more of this video conferencing and a bit more faith now that the masses are going to it. And for me, I think it's incredible. As you know, I'm a new mother. I know you've got 3 daughters.
Yes.
And it makes such a difference. It makes such a difference to be able to do this from home and not necessarily hop in a car. I mean, my baby is 4 months old, and because a lot of my clients are in Europe, what happens is we get up, I can hop on a few calls for a couple of hours. I can do some work whilst my husband looks after our little boy. Yeah. And then he can pass him back to me, and then my husband can go into the office or currently work from here. And having that flexibility makes all the difference. Absolutely. So I think for parents in particular, it just makes such a big difference having that kind of slightly more flexible schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make a difference. I mean, like I said, I'm here with my girls. I'm here with the dog. Well, before we got here to record this podcast, we just went on a walk just through our neighborhood. Just, to get out, get air. We're doing that every day. And so, we're not as stringent with our schedule, but they spend some time doing some, activities in terms of, to stimulate the minds beyond just sitting playing an iPad or watching TV and that sort of thing where your mind goes to mush. But, we're having conversations and answering questions and, again, challenging ourselves, mentally, but still having fun, of course. I don't want to rob them of that. So we're spending time doing that dedicated time, that I've got dedicated time in my work where they understand that and they're able to keep themselves busy and that sort of thing. And then we have a time and say, okay, we're going to have lunch and then we're going to go on a walk and we're going to take the dog with us and we're going to walk this far for this amount of time and that sort of thing, and take a look at what's going on in the neighborhood. So I'm asking them questions. What do you see? What do you think that is? They're seeing houses and, people walking by and driving by and all that type of thing. And again, it's just to keep us active, right? But then now I'm right back and I get a chance, that flexibility to work, which is different, like you mentioned, of managing a remote team, Jodie. I've done that before. I've managed teams, obviously, face-to-face and then remote. And the more you're present, the more distractions, the more, hey, Ron, what do you think about the score of the game? Hey, Ron, I get a play-by-play after every prospect they talk to and everybody that told them no and everybody this. And why do we have to meet about that? And, why is the corporate doing this? And, by the time you get through a whole day, you've been engulfed in all this, all these distractions, right? And then your family sometimes either gets neglected or you're rushing. So you're stressed about, oh God, I got to get there by 6 o'clock and I got to do this and I got to do that. I got to put dinner on and I got to clean this up and I got to do, so, parents have all these stress points, right? And again, I think that's going to kind of get away as we adopt this style of how we interact without sacrificing, again, the face-to-face interaction.
And as you say, that balance with families and things is so important.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that I'm really curious about to come out the other side on LA, because LA is going through, or has been over the last 10 years, going through this big change of becoming this real kind of capital of consumer innovation and being quite tech.
Yeah.
And like Facebook and Amazon and Apple and Netflix and Google, the FANG companies have all taken a massive amount of office space here.
Yeah.
But Hollywood is at the core, right? So Hollywood is a very face-to-face business.
Right.
It's really face-to-face. It's so traditional. And I've got friends, of course, because I live in LA, who are actors and actresses.
Of course.
And I've got one couple in particular where the wife is an actress and her husband works for a big tech company. And she said one day, she said, I don't understand, like, you need a PA. Like, who schedules all these calls? Who decides where you meet and what you do? And he said, I use conferencing. Like, it's easy. Right. I do that. But in the acting world, of course, you have a manager because they're the one who tells you who you're seeing at what day or right. what time and at which restaurant. And a lot of that is, if you think about it, big movies don't have, the acting roles aren't advertised. Brad Pitt doesn't respond to an ad somewhere. It's right. all about, it's all about those relationships. And so that's kind of really at the heart of LA, is these relationships and this kind of face-to-face. And so it's starting to switch online. But we've got these kind of two polar opposites in in LA, where you've got this very face-to-face group who are now going to have to adapt to the more tech group. But then I think the tech side, as we've just talked about, people are going to get a bit more flexible and slow down a bit. So watching that all come together afterwards, I think is going to be fascinating. I really do.
Absolutely. Jodie Hopperton is our guest today here on episode 138 of the Minding Your Business podcast. Now Jodie, as we're talking about Los Angeles, talk about the book, how we can, the name of the book, how we can get our hands on it and learn a little bit more about your perspective on Los Angeles.
Totally. So thank you. So as I said, this, where it came from, I just want to do the short spiel to kind of really build it up and explain why I've written this. What on earth is an English girl doing with writing a book about Los Angeles? So as I said, I've dealt with so many business leaders who all say, I want to learn about innovation. I want to go to Silicon Valley. Yeah. And after, it was one summer, I'd been back to Europe and I was speaking at a couple of conferences there. And it really annoyed me that I kept having the same conversation. And I realized that as I was having these conversations, what's a way in which I can convey all of these things that are happening here? And I realized that actually writing a book was probably one of the best ways of doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and interview a whole bunch of execs here. So from founders of businesses that I think are really innovative and doing really well, to execs at big companies and big studios like Sony and Disney, right through to the venture capitalists here, who are the ones providing a lot of the funds to really understand, what is it that makes LA so innovative and what's changed about it, and why do people not realize about all the things that are happening in LA? And as I did that, I realized that, yes, there is very much a book here. So I like to say it's for the business culturally curious. So if you're interested in a particular industry, or you're particularly interested in different ways of doing business, I talk about Los Angeles and some of the things that are different here.
Yeah.
Out of, Hollywood, like gaming comes out of Hollywood.
Sure.
All the same skill sets. It's about character development and world building and effects and things like that. So I hadn't really thought about that before, but of course then LA would become the gaming capital. And for consumer innovation, it's a really diverse audience here in Silicon Valley. It's, dare I say, very white male tech oriented. But
Sure.
LA's way more diverse. Like 48% of Angelenos are Hispanic.
Of course.
We've got this mass diverse audience. So if you're going to test a product here, it makes sense. So I put the book together. It's a group of different stories from these execs.
Okay.
Really inspiring stories, like from a guy that started his business at 15, who now basically owns half of the kombucha industry. He's the one who brought kombucha to market. And that is a $600 million industry right now.
Yeah,
I mean, it's insane. And it purely comes from passion, right through to talking about Homeboy Industries, which helps rehabilitate ex-gang members so they can go into the working world. So a bunch of inspiring stories, but also quite practical information. And it's all full color. It's got lots of graphs and charts and photos. So it depends what kind of person you are, but you should be able to find either the narrative sides or the facts and figures or the graphics to really help you learn and understand in the way that suits you. And then if you're anything like me, sometimes there's things that I keep meaning to get to, but I'm like, just want the bullet points. Can you just give me the high level? So at the end of each chapter, I've done a TLDR, a too long didn't read. So if you're going out with someone who's a retail exec for tonight, here's the top 5 things you need to know.
Sure.
So the book is called Los Angeles Reinvented, and it's why innovators are looking south of Silicon Valley to the booming home of Hollywood. By the time this podcast comes out, it will be up on Amazon, but there's also the website www.lareinvented.com where you can get a pre-order.
Awesome.
I was going to launch it later on in April. We had an amazing launch event planned with the Annenberg Foundation here, and there was this beautiful photographic exhibition on right now on Vanity Fair, Hollywood Calling. But we've had to cancel that. So we're just going all digital. It's all coming out online. And then hopefully once all this is over, we'll be able to get all of these amazing innovators, founders and execs together for a celebration of the book and a celebration that we can actually see each other again.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that website then again, Jodie, is lareinvented.com. Perfect. Yep. So it might be in the show notes. You'll be able to go click that link and go ahead and pre-order. If you're listening to this podcast at a little bit later date, go ahead and order your copy and send Jodie a message and let her know that you heard her right here on the Minding Your Business podcast. Speaking of not being able to see each other, Jodie, what are your thoughts on just everything that's kind of going around? Obviously, you're talking to international executives all the time, and you've got a media background, so you understand messaging and you understand presentation. You understand building relationships and that sort of thing. What's your take on what's going on right now in terms of the coronavirus pandemic and its impact on business, kind of from a macro level? And then, how is it, give us an insight on how it maybe is having an impact, there in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, I think none of us really know what the final impact of this is going to be. We've talked about some of those social impacts and how it's going to change. I think from a personal standpoint of running and owning my own business, the first lesson to entrepreneurs is always have at least 6 months money in the bank. Always. Because you never know, like this has come from nowhere. And that's my first rule of thumb. If you're going to start a business, great. Give yourself time to ramp up and always make sure you've got enough to cover yourself. So you don't have that stress, because if you're a consultant, if you're an individual, that can be hard and you might be providing for your family. So that's my first rule of thumb. I think one of the things that I've been really surprised at, and I hope is the silver lining in some of this, is that particularly with the people I've spoken to and with a lot of the media I've seen, the first and foremost is really stay well, stay healthy. And it's it's about human to human, much more than business to business, which I think just highlighting that for me has been amazing, and really seeing that. And I've had that from all my clients, and that's my first check-in. The marketeers and the branding agencies I've spoken to have all said the same thing. You know, should we stop marketing? Should we stop doing branding right now? And it's like, well, just be sensible about how you do it. Be authentic. You know, don't try and sell people things. But if you're caring and you're considerate and you can help in some way, then yes, of course, this is a really good time to have those conversations with your consumers and with your audience and really connect with them on a fundamental level.
Sure.
So I think we're going to see a lot of that. And then in LA, I think it's a really entrepreneurial place, and that's incredible. And there's a lot of businesses here. There's a lot of focus on retail, and that is mostly e-commerce. So I've seen a few of those businesses they're working hard, and they are working long hours to make sure their businesses can really ramp up supply.
Yeah.
And then the other side of it I've seen is for the people that don't necessarily have that, and the people whose work slowed down. So a lot of my projects, obviously, a lot of my clients who are coming over, they can't come over anymore, or they're postponing their trips, and we don't know when we're going to revisit. They're just postponed, they're not cancelled. But I think then for the people that have got the moments to slow down, it's actually taking stock then of what you can do. I know a bunch of people are taking courses on things that are useful to their business. And so sort of really getting that ground level and getting that foundation in place. And I think we have to see what comes out the other end. But I think strong businesses, e-commerce will certainly come out the other side. I'm hoping it's giving a chance to people to kind of restock and relook at the courses and the skill sets that they've got, and maybe learn a new skill or two that can be useful in the future.
Sure.
And I think it will bounce back. I'm hoping this camaraderie will stay, and we will all support each other and support the small businesses out there. That's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, I love that perspective and that thought of what you just provided, Jodie. And so, what are some best practices for people? I know you just kind of shared, your thoughts in terms of, this current pandemic, but what are, one or two quick best practices that you have that you could share with MYB?
Yeah, the biggest one is being authentic. It sounds really cheesy, but just be who you are and be true to your audience. The people who are trying to fleece other people, your clients will pick that up in a second. So really be authentic and be caring about your consumers and really build personal relationships. That is everything. That really is everything. And then listening is the other thing that I'm not sure we do enough of. And that is the most important, is getting the feedback. Sometimes it's hard to hear. And so sometimes we need to just put that back and say, okay, I'm going to deal with this in an hour or two. But listen to that feedback. Try not to take it personally if it's negative. If it's positive, also try not to take it too personally. We all get wins and fails along the way. Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's timing. But really listen and adapt your business based on feedback. So I think those are my two things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm right there with you, Jodie. Thank you so much. I think that greatly helps some folks here that are listening to the podcast and just looking for a good word, and you've definitely provided that to them. So, again, I thank you so much for taking time out to be here on the podcast. I really do. It's been a great dialogue. I hope to remain connected to you. Definitely will be looking out for the book, get my hands on the book here, and make sure that MYB, you do the same. As the book is released here very soon. For those that are listening early here to the podcast, or if you're listening to this at a later date, we want to make sure we support Jodie in that. When I make it up.
Ron, you know what? Because I've really enjoyed this podcast, and why don't we? I'll set up a special discount code, so that for people looking at the show notes afterwards, any of your listeners can get a special discount with a code. So let's figure that out. We'll put that in the show notes. All
right, excellent. Yeah, so you heard that, MYB. We'll figure that out. That's very gracious of Jodie for her to do that. So now here's an opportunity for you to save a few bucks as you get the information and get her perspective and the perspective of her clients, her international executive clients there on the city of Los Angeles. I think you'll find great insight on that, no matter where you live, as Los Angeles is a very critical city in our country, obviously. And so, again, Jodie, thank you. I can't thank you enough for your time. Best wishes to you personally and professionally. And when I make it out to Los Angeles, I have to look you up and go on one of those tours, maybe meet some of your executives.
I hope so. Or I will take you to the beach, take you for a hike, and we'll talk about all things LA, and then I'll take you out to meet some of the execs here.
There you go. That's excellent. That sounds like a plan.
I love it. Ron, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much.
Yep, absolutely. Same to you, Jodie. Take care.
Take care.
All right. So that was Jodie Hopperton with FORE.media. Make sure that you go and you check her out. LA Reinvented.com, LAReinvented.com, where you can get a copy of her book. You can check her out on her website, which is Jodie Hop, Jodie Hop.com. That's JodieHop.com. Make sure you check her out right there. And then let her know that you heard her here on episode 138 of the Minding Your Business podcast, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. Make sure you check me out too. I've got my podcast consulting practice open. Brandyourpod.com is where you can go for BrandPod is the name of the company, brandyourpod.com. Check me out. I'd love to be able to help your business and your brand amplify your story. And so that's what we want to do, amplify your story to your community, to your customers, to your prospects. You have a story to tell as it relates to your brand and business, and I want to help you do that in the form of podcasting. Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast. Listen, go be great. The fear and hysteria is going to be there. Be safe, protect your family, be smart, and look for opportunities here to help others and to be great. Champ Ron.
What we do here is go back.